Thank you very much, Stephen. We start here this evening. The Government Employee Pension Fund has posted a 9.6% growth in its funds with a record market value of 2.3 trillion rands. It recently made the announcement that it paid out 136 billion rands in benefits, making it one of the biggest, if not the biggest fund on the continent. There have been some changes and talk of more about how the changes will affect the more than 1 million government workers and how the fund is actually doing. We are joined by Musa, Mabesa, the Principal Executive Officer of the GEPF. Mr. Mabesa, thank you very much for joining us. This continued growth of the fund, irrespective of the prevailing difficult economic conditions, clearly indicates that the long-term investment strategies by the GEPF in growing the fund are actually working.
Good evening, Kolani. Indeed, the long-term strategy of the fund is working. We are a defined benefit fund. Our responsibility is to invest responsibly to ensure that we can sustain the payment of benefits to our members, pensioners and beneficiaries in the short term, medium term as well as the long term. So we are confident that we are able to meet those liabilities in the long term, and this is testament to that strategy delivering accordingly.
The Public Investment Corporation, let's talk about that. They are the GEPF's own investment vehicle, and it also posted assets under management, including that of the GEPF, to the highest it has ever been at 2.56 trillion rand. Let's talk about the investment landscape turning away from some investments, and particularly because of this issue of ESG. Not an issue, just an issue. It is quite important one, environmental, social and governance considerations. One such important consideration going forward, looking at how other investment firms are doing, is investments on coal. What is the GEPF's views when it comes to the investments that your funds will be used for in the future, and the talk that South Africa should move away from coal?
Thanks, Kolani, for that good question. So we are cognizant of the need to move away from fossil fuels into clean energy. And our exposure and reliance as South Africa on coal necessarily for the generation of electricity is a reality. The GEPF is committed to the just energy transition, and we have invested, for example, over 10 billion rand over the last couple of years in renewable energy projects, which have contributed well over 1,000 megawatts of electricity into the grid. And we'll continue to explore opportunities in renewable energy in the country. But we have to be realistic about just transition as a concept as we move forward towards renewables, understanding the context of South Africa, how much we rely on coal-fired power stations. And then when we do that transition, let's think about the impact on the communities, the lives that will be impacted by this move, as well as the livelihoods. Not forgetting that there is an impact, obviously, to the environment. So the policies that we have in place, we have a responsible investment policy at the GEPF. We are signatories to the United Nations Principle for Responsible Investment. We also prescribe that our investments should take into account the ESG frameworks that we have in place. So we are cognizant of the need for a just transition. We have to invest responsibly, take into account the impact on the environment, but we must do so responsibly and being conscious of the South African context in moving away from coal. So we will do that responsibly. We will explore. We will play our part as a good corporate citizen in ensuring that this transition is done responsibly.
That is a difficult task, Mr. Mabesa, because as the principal executive officer, you are tasked with making sure that your investments yield the actual results and they are not disruptive in terms of the investment landscape, seeing that the PIC, which invests on your behalf, actually is estimated at 12% of the JSE. How do you weigh going forward the cause, particularly on coal, for South Africa to move away from coal? Because already you are invested in coal in one way or the other right now.
As I've indicated, that this call must be looked at in the context of South Africa and our history behind how we generate electricity. So as we move towards a just transition, what we will do is that as we engage with other partners in this landscape, we've already engaged other pension funds in South Africa. We are in talks with other pension funds and other organizations like USAID and all of those that have an interest in our just energy transition landscape, is how do we do that responsibly? And what I indicated to you is that our ESG frameworks, our affiliation with the United Nations for Principal Investment, the Code for Responsible Investment in South Africa, and our ESG frameworks dictate that we move away from coal, but assess the impact and look at ways to replace the livelihoods and the impacts in the communities that we are impacting. For example, our exposure to Eskom is through bonds that we hold at about 81 billion rands worth of Eskom bonds that we hold. We cannot fool ourselves and think that wishing away coal and the generation of power currently in the current arrangement will then take away the exposure that we have. So we must find solutions that are realistic in our context, and we like to say we need to find solutions for South Africa, African solutions that are fit for our problems. So this solution is not going to happen alone, but we are glad by the guidance that is provided through the presidency and the climate task team that is led by Mr. Daniel Minele, as well as other forums that are being driven in the country that the GEPF is also part of.
There was a recovery as well when you look at the latest report in the funds, unlisted and property portfolios. You are continuing to strengthen oversight in these strategies. Talk to us about the unlisted portfolio and your property portfolio as well, how it performed.
So the unlisted portfolio accounts for about 4 to 5% of the total assets under management of the GEPF. And in 2020, we saw a huge devaluation of the value of our unlisted investments due to the advent of COVID, as well as the global economic turmoil that we all experienced at that time. So this good performance, the recovery that we've seen in our unlisted portfolio specifically, is testament to the strategy that we have in place, but as well as the robust economy that we're operating in, and the case for unlisted investments in our country as well as globally. The property sector as well continues to struggle, but the recovery in our property investments demonstrates that we still need property as an asset class, as well as unlisted as well, are going to be necessary as a catalyst for economic growth going forward. We'll see jobs and economic growth going forward coming from our unlisted and private equity portfolio, and we'll do more within the confines of our strategic allocation to ensure that we play our part responsibly so that the developmental agenda of our investments can be achieved.
Let's talk about the issue of the two-pot system, where we are going to be allowing government employees to actually make sure that they survive these tough economic times, they have access to their pensions. How would you like to see when this is implemented? I think it is 2024 March. How would you like to see that pan out? Because a lot of those beneficiaries are waiting in the wings to actually get some financial relief. What would be the best outcome for the GEPF?
All right, Kolani, I think let me preface my response by indicating that the intention of a retirement fund is to preserve retirement savings so that members can enjoy their retirement comfortably. And we like the aspect of forced preservation in that a component of your retirement savings once the two-pot system is effective is that people will be forced to preserve until retirement. So we will have compulsory preservation, and pensioners at the time of retirement will then have something to look forward to at the time of retirement. What we hope for is that whatever form of access happens at the time will not necessarily impair the members' ability at retirement to live comfortably as envisaged. We do know that the intention of a retirement scheme is to provide for members to live comfortably, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but on average, a member who retires would need to live off about 75% of their final salary just before retirement. So if you now start accessing a portion of your retirement savings while still in active service, that already diminishes your ability to sustain yourself at retirement. So whatever final arrangement is put in place with the two-pot system, we are glad that there is that forced compulsory preservation in the end, and we can only hope that there will be other mechanisms for members to save alongside their GEPF savings. So the culture of savings will then be encouraged once we've recovered from this global crisis that we're all seeing economically.
Mr. Musa Mabesa, thank you very much for your time. He is the Principal Executive Officer at the Government Employee Pension Fund. We're talking about a number of issues, but prime to those issues is the fact that in the past year, the fund has grown 9.6%.